Okay, folks, this one's called Comicsgate, SJWs, and the Real Comics Landscape. And I made this video as a sequel to my previous one, Comicsgate, SJWs, Fragile Egos, and Valid Critiques, because I felt like I did a really poor job of categorizing the sides involved in the Comicsgate and the SJW conflict. And I want to thank Mark Brooks, especially. You'll see him up here in the upper right hand corner from my vision, at least. And he and I had a lengthy Twitter discussion that started off a little bit, but lightened up later on, where we were actually able to have a real conversation. And I think he adequately explained to me some of what was really going on in his head as far as what this whole Comicsgate thing is about, and what the SJW, though he wouldn't identify himself as that, response to that is. Now, I mean, by SJW, I'm really talking about people who are more progressive and in their political thinking and social thinking, and also um, on the side of those who are pushing that progressive agenda in the comics uh, forum. So whether or not anybody here particularly identifies as Comicsgate or identifies as SJW, which I'm not using as a pejorative, by the way. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who do use SJW as a pejorative. I just think it's a quick way of saying social justice warrior, which is not necessarily a pejorative, especially in the minds of people who think that way. I mean, they're basically saying, as I saw one person say on Twitter, it's like, well, what else am I supposed to be, an anti-social justice warrior? And it's almost like an affirmative label for the people who believe that way. Whereas, to people who don't believe that way, they may use that as a negative or a pejorative, but it's not necessarily taken that way. So it's kind of confusing how these labels are applied, who actually thinks these labels are applied to them. But I noticed in when I was doing my video that as I was talking about the different sides involved, as I was talking about independent comic book creators versus creators for hire, that I was mixing those two with the Comicsgate and the SJW labels specifically, so that when I was done, I had really divided the comic book industry into Comicsgate slash independent creators as if that was one monolithic block, and then SJW's creators for hire as if that was one monolithic block. And I really shouldn't have done that, because if you take an example out of either one of those, like Ethan Van Sciver out of the Comicsgate area or Mark Brooks out of the SJW area, then what I was basically saying by the end of my video was that I would like to see there be these avenues of opportunity between the two areas, such that they could cross over at will and cross populate with ideas and such. And that led me to think, well, wait a minute, if Mark Brooks were to cross out of the creators for hire space, well, that doesn't mean that he would be a conservative now, that he was an independent creator, nor does it mean if Ethan Van Sciver were to go over and work for Marvel or DC again, that wouldn't make him an SJW. So, what am I really saying here? And it didn't really make a lot of sense, not even to me at that point. And I felt like I needed to come back and really talk about the comics landscape and what it really consists of at this point. So, if you're looking at the comics landscape as a politics free area, then I would separate it into two overlapping balloons, which is one being independent creators. These are the people who are working on material that is their own. They're not working for any of the big two companies. And I know that there's going to be like working for some of these other distributor companies like Image or Dark Horse or things like that. I'm trying to at least simplify this a little, so that we're really just dealing with the independent creators versus those who are creators for hire with the big two, where they're not really bringing their own creations to the table, except whatever, maybe supplemental characters or villains or things that they may create for the company in the course of their run. But they're writing for titles like Batman, for Green Lantern, for Spider-Man, for the Hulk. They're they're working for companies that own the properties, and they might get royalties, some for their creations that while they're working there for hire, but generally they're getting a paycheck. Whereas the independent creators are working with their own material, they own their own material, they have full control over it, and so they can create for it and distribute it as they like. So this to me is the politics-free comics landscape. And if I were to have my way and think of an idealized comics landscape, because everybody has political views, so you're not going to have an entirely politics-free comics landscape. So thinking in more of a real-world terms, but also still keeping it ideal. The idealized comic landscape does have a place for SJWs, because these are the people who are, super creative, on the forefront of trying to push progressive ideas and be on the bleeding edge of social commentary, and so they have their place in the comic book world. But also do the people who are on the more conservative side, like Comicsgate. And the Comicsgaters are basically saying, look, we appreciate your creativity, but you can't extend that creativity such that it warps the basic nature of the characters that people have become familiar with over not just years but decades. I mean, there are characters now that have been around for over 50 years, and if you tamper with them too much, especially to just try and inject your kind of politics into them where they don't belong, then you're going to warp the character into something unrecognizable, warp the storylines beyond what anybody can possibly recognize, and you're going to lose a lot of the traction and audience that you've brought with you thus far. And this is kind of reflective of a healthy political climate, and any kind of healthy climate in a political society, because what you want are the people out there. You've got the independents, you've got the people who are more in the structured area, and even within that, you've got the people who are more progressive and more conservative, because you want that dynamic tension between looking into the future and seeing what the needs of the future are, because the future is not like the past. You have to adapt to present day concerns and satisfy the audience that you have. But you also don't want to lose the audience that you've gained up to this point by moving too far in one direction. And so that's the purpose that the Comicsgaters would serve, in that they would be more of a restraining force on the SJWs and say, okay, look, slow down, Haas. We gotta at least bring people forward a bit at a time, so that we're not losing them altogether, because they still make up the bulk of our audience. Now, what has the actually politicized comics landscape come to look like? Well, from the Comicsgate perspective, which is the only perspective that I'm really kind of tuned into at this point, I can say that they view the creators for hire space as having been completely dominated by the SJW concerns, to the point where the Comicsgate point of view has been absolutely crushed out. And now Comicsgate can only really exist as a space among the independent creators. And you might have some people here or there who are doing, either creators for hire and maybe a little bit of independent creator stuff, and they're on the conservative side, but they either keep their heads down or they're just too famous to fire at this point. But they are having to work within this sea of progressivism that is not to their liking. Maybe they're having to write stories that are not to their liking, or draw stories or color stories that are not to their liking. And they're really worried about what the audience is thinking, but at the same time, they have no real voice within the company. And if they were to speak up, they would be forced out into the independent creator space along with the rest of Comicsgate. So, what is the appeal that Comicsgate is making to those creators who are still in the creator for hire space, the ones that have not made the jump into independent creators? Well, they're basically saying, look, your industry, the companies that you are working for, are trash fires now. They are coming out with crap that is so permeated with the SJW mentality that you're losing your audience and these companies are not going to survive. There's actually been some serious talk among the Comicsgate people about whether or not DC Comics is going to survive as a company going forward. I mean, yes, they've got these properties, but are they just going to exist as movies? Maybe they'll discontinue comics altogether. I've never heard anything of the kind, but who knows? There's all sorts of room for creative destruction in the market. And so, you creators who are still in the creator for hire space, you need to come and jump over to the independent creator space, because when you do, and you can either come to us in Comicsgate, or you can, just be out there as independent creators. But when you do, then you're going to, first of all, avoid the absolute cataclysm that is coming to the big two companies as they continue down this progressive rabbit hole into the inferno. And moreover, this is where the on the independent side is where the money is. You've seen people like Ethan Van Sciver with his 1.4 million for Cyberfrog. You've seen Eric July with his 3.5 million for ISOM. There is serious money to be gained on the independent creator side. So why not make the leap? Leave the dumpster fire that's already in progress and come on over to the independent creator side. We'll help you. We'll embrace you. We will make sure that you are set up with what you need. And we can make good product together that's going to satisfy the needs of the audience that the progressive big two are leaving behind. Now, on the SJW side, their rebuttal to this is basically, wait a minute, we're not a dumpster fire. We've got all the good things on our side. We've got the rainbow flags. We've got the trans flags. We've got the BLM logos for social justice. We've got the actual freaking tacos on the covers of Mexican Heritage Month DC Comics. I couldn't believe that when I saw that. But we've got all the good stuff over here. And if Comicsgate is going to hate on us for all of the good stuff that we've got over here, well, that just means that they're Nazis. And what's more, the dollars that they're making from all of their independent creations is not really based on the merit of their product. They're not making any better comics than we are. All that's happening is they are capitalizing on the dissatisfaction that some number of the audience, whom we care not for, is expressing towards the big two on account of all of the good things, the Candyland sprinkles that we have on our side. And we just basically are saying, hey, we are okay not getting your money. As far as we're concerned, those are swastika dollars. We don't want your swastika dollars, you Nazi audience contingent who aren't satisfied with all of the wonderful things we're bringing you. And so if you want to give your money over to the Comicsgate Nazis, you are absolutely welcome to do so. Now, of course, the Comicsgate counter to that is, look, dudes, money is money. And if they're not giving it to you, maybe that's cause for some serious self-reflection on your part as to say, whether or not they're giving it to us on the basis of the merit of our product, or they're giving it to us on the basis of the fact that they really detest where you've taken comic books in this period of time. Maybe this is room for self-reflection on your part so that you can kind of see what you're doing for the dumpster fire that it is. And moreover, who's the real Nazis? Are the real Nazis the people who have, extricated themselves from the dumpster fire so they could do their own thing and collect the money that is waiting for them? Or are the real Nazis the people who have pushed out those people who would have liked to have stayed but couldn't because of the fierce political pressure exerted by the SJW cabal, if you want to call it that, on the whole creator for hire space, so that we cannot have at this current time the idealized comics landscape that would be beneficial to all, that would keep a sense of restraint on the comics while at the same time allow for creative exploration. So that's where I kind of want to leave it on this particular slide, because I want people to kind of get it embedded in their minds that in a healthy society and the comic book industry in itself is a society, you have room for both elements. You just don't want either element to get too completely dominating, or else you're going to wind up losing a significant portion of the audience. If you don't change at all, you're going to wind up dissatisfying people who are looking for something new. If you change things too much, you're going to wind up dissatisfying people who would like to see some of the tried and true resemblance to what it is that they grew up with and have been supporting all those years. And so, this is what I would hope that we could get to someday again. And, I don't know, I may be naive in thinking that we were ever at this point, but, but this is, I think, somewhere along the lines of the best that we can hope for. And I think it's a noble goal to progress towards. So thank you for watching. I hope this clears up some of the confusion that I'm almost certain I sowed with my last video, and I hope that this video is a lot more accurate with regards to where people stand in the various kinds of bubbles that they inhabit. Because I really don't want to misrepresent people's positions, and I think that at this point I've got a better grasp on where this whole Comicsgate and SJW saga lies. So if you agree, disagree, please feel free to leave comments in the video in the comments section. And that's going to be it for me for now. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching, and do subscribe if you haven't already, and I will talk to you later.